Marhaban, welcome guys to this episode of 3 Dates. And again, today we are 3 Dates today. And Al-Taf will be joining us in a bit, inshallah ta'ala. Let us know if you guys can hear and if you guys can see. Just put in the comments, inshallah. So at the moment, we are live streaming onto Facebook. We're live streaming onto YouTube and also on Twitter as well, Periscope. Right? So I don't think there's anything else that we've got social media on that we can live stream onto, and if we did, we probably would be doing that as well. So yeah, if you guys can let us know, inshallah. I am not feeling very well. Yeah, I've been a bit ill for the past few days. I'm going to try to talk. So Brother Maroof, I do apologize. Yeah, my throat, if my throat gives up on me. But Naveed, we know Naveed, mashallah, Allah has gifted him with many ni'mas. From amongst those ni'mas is the ability to be able to talk, inshallah. Last week he couldn't talk. Yeah, okay. That gift was taken away temporarily, and we did have a little a snap shot of his silence. But alhamdulillah. So today, inshallah, we have Brother Maroof joining us. MashaAllah, Brother Maroof. I probably met Brother Maroof how many years ago? I think it's probably about 8-9 years ago, 10 years ago, 8-9.
Probably, yeah. The first time we met, probably about coming up to about a decade.
Mashallah. Time flies so fast. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. And Nav obviously knows Maroof much way further back than me. So, Brother Maroof, if you can just tell us about your sort of like experience with Naveed. What kind of a guy is this guy?
I don't think we can expose this on social media. It's not safe enough to do so.
Thank you for that, Maroof. Maroof, I like your shirt, by the way, mashallah. Very snazzy.
See, he's buttering me up for this response now.
Allah, please.
So I think we first met during one of our conferences. One of the volunteers or one of our brothers was leafleting. I think it was outside Gumgol Masjid. And we call Naveed Tiny, by the way. This is like the people that know will know. We've got a number of Naveeds in Al-Hikmah, the DAWAH organization that Tiny came into. And because we had one which was big, one which was little, and then Naveed came along, so he had to be the tiny Naveed. Although he's tiny by no means. So,
anyway, moving on to
okay, so Naveed had just started Casino, kind of. So he went to a Jummah.
1 minute, sorry. Is this after Naveed took that picture with Wazio? You know, that before and after picture?
It's probably not too long after that.
Alhamdulillah.
So, I mean, Naveed didn't have, he was before his BAD days and all that kind of stuff. So I think he ended up at Gumgol for Jummah, and one of the brothers were leafleting, and he picked up a leaflet. And I think that brother was getting harassed for leafleting at Gumgol. So, you know, where this controversy, Tiny wants to be part of it. So since that brother was getting a bit of stick, Naveed said, I'll help you out. And then he started leafleting. And then he just basically, I think he mentioned that he was going to get involved in some dawah kind of stuff. And that's where the journey began. Then we met. He got involved with Al-Hikmah. We had classes and we started attending our circles, and then we've known each other since. We've been on deployments together, been involved in a number of events over the years. I think he started his first spoken poetry at one of our events, and then so that, I mean, we've just known each other very well. We've been on Umrah together. You know, we've shared ideas, we've grown together in terms of the way we think, and we've been able to influence each other. So I would say that's how.
Before we do go on, tell the people a little bit about yourself, what you do as a day job, and how you actually got involved with the dawah yourself. Like, I know it's a bit of a long story, but like summarize and share whatever you feel like sharing.
So at school, so generally, I've kind of like always been praying kind of stuff, and that's probably been as a result of the influence of my mother. So my mother was like culturally practicing, whereas my dad was totally the opposite. He was like proper secular. Like when I was young, he didn't pray, he didn't fast. You know, like more unpracticing than your average Pakistani would be. So he was extra non-practicing. He was like pro-science, pro-evolution theory, didn't believe in concepts of miracles, that kind of stuff. So he was very, you know, you could say my anti-influence Islam, and my mother was the opposite. Like I think in the last 25 years, she's probably only missed the Hajj if she's been hospitalized. It's like every single day she'd read Quran, the Hajj, and she's just very culturally practicing. So she brought me up practicing, and my dad was very anti me practicing because went against everything he kind of stood for at the time. He's moved on and he's changed. So when I had a passion for they were very like Islam is for the scholars, kind of like, you know, like even if you learn Arabic, you'll never understand, and this is something beyond you. And it was very limiting the kind of opportunities that were there. And this is like, so I went in that 90, like the early 90s when I was in high school. Now where you could access people and so forth, so it was very controlled. So what I did is I went into Christianity. So I studied starting. I thought there's no room really for me to grow and learn in Islamic studies without being very cultural, kind of a studying of just like, you know, tradition, not academics Islamic studies, but just, you know, just pray and all kind of stuff. So where there was scope for me to develop was Christianity. So I was quite inspired by Ahmadiyya and his works, as he was probably one of the very few English-speaking speakers at that time, say in the early 90s. So I went, and then at school, I had access to a number of Christians and so forth. So I went and I memorized like some half of the, like I literally know more Bible than I know. So I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. But,
sorry, Maroof. Sorry, I think there's a bit of echo from your. If you can just, you know, in the cog where the cog button is, it says advanced settings. So I think echo cancellation might help that. So the viewers are experiencing some echo from your side.
You mean in the live studio app, or you mean on my settings?
Yeah. So if you press that cog.
In the app itself, Maroof,
Okay.
there's the mic, there's video, and there's share screen. It's the one after that.
It does have echo cancellation ticked.
Yeah, so you might I don't know, you might have to take it off. Sometimes you have to take it on, sometimes off.
Okay, does that sound better?
Yeah, viewers, does that sound better? Yeah, I think it sounds better.
Singer Kawati will know.
Sing a hymn. School, we used to have to learn all those hymns, you know.
So where were you, Maroof? You said you studied Luke, basically.
I mean, if I'm echoing, I can dial in from my phone.
It sounds better now. It sounds a lot better. I don't know, maybe the viewers. Yeah. So sorry.
Shall I
you were
connect
saying...
by my phone? Would that be better?
Yeah, maybe that might be. Yeah, that might be. Yeah, so whilst Brother Maroof is connecting, so I think, you know, I personally think I started practicing when I was like in the late 90s, basically. And it's like one of those strange kind of things where, you know, there was... yeah. Why is there echo on my side? Okay, yeah. That should be better.
Is that better?
Okay, excellent. So in the late 90s, I think a lot of people started to become practicing through like strange things. Like, it was like there wasn't anything on the media regarding Muslims that was going to make you think about Islam. It was like the Shadows cassette. Yeah, the Shadows cassette was for me. That was like, yeah, man. You know what I'm saying? This is it. This is what Islam's all about. This guy with the typical English old man's voice. Yeah, telling you about.
How come people are blaming me for that?
Yeah, I think Maroof is fine now. Yeah, Maroof was fine. Oh, guys, come on! Don't blame Naveed for everything. Yeah.
Always me. Make dua for Mufti Saab.
Allah.
Allah.
Oh, Altaf's come. Altaf is here. MashaAllah, MashaAllah.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam.
These are the blue. These are the blue. This blue tea, basically. This is what it is. These leaves.
Wait, there is Mufti Saab Bimar or something?
Yeah, he's ill.
Yeah, man. No Lucasade, no nothing. Why? What's this?
Naveed, where the heck are you?
I'm at work, bro.
We know we know all the admin figures now.
This is it, bro.
That chair you guys very
I don't
nice.
know which direction the podcast was heading here, so I turned the banner the other way around before I get into trouble. Can you see it? That's all.
Oh, mashallah.
Yeah, so Altaf, Maroof was just telling us about his his background and how he knew more Bible than Quran, right? But the story hasn't finished yet. Story hasn't finished. So yeah, Brother Maroof.
Yeah, so because of the lack of scope that was there for the Islamic studies, I pursued my studies in Christianity and biblical studies. And then at college, I went into like comparative religion with regards to Sikhism. So I was predominantly brought up in a school that there was hardly any Muslims. So in my year, there was only like 6 Muslims. So it was very like a white Sikh kind of influence kind of school. So I would say, so my first contact with being activism was like trying to defend Islam and expose the problems with Christianity. But it was also very empowering because what the Christian community and scholarship allowed me to do at the time, which the Muslim community wouldn't allow, was to engage with the text. So the Islamic circles were like, you need to spend like 20 years studying before you even are able to understand what Bismillah means, kind of thing. Whereas like in Christianity, it was just like, well, since you've done a number of years of basic studies, you're open to presenting your interpretations or your understanding on stuff such as evolution and euthanasia and abortion, and justifying the different perspectives and all that kind of stuff. So it's very empowering because it kind of gave you the confidence and ability to grow in it. So I used it from an Islamic perspective to show the problems and the evolution of Christianity. And so that was my initial, you could say, involvement in activism. Then when I was 16, I went to my first English Islamic event, which was at Aston Uni. It was the Islamic Awareness Week. And I was at college. I was at Hillsdale College, but we went over to me and a friend to the Islamic Awareness Week. And I was really inspired by the first 2 events I went to. So one of them was like, they created kind of like a cinema night, and they showed the message. So it was the first time I ever saw the message. So having, like studied and looked at the seerah and so forth, but then seeing it animated on TV or like on the kind of cinema screen, that was a very moving experience. And then the following day, I went to a talk, and it was probably the first English speaking talk I went to in person. And that was by Sheikh Shahab, actually. And that shows how long he's been on the circuit. So this was 1996. And then I just saw young people who were like in education, who were active in Islam, and I was really inspired by that. So that led me to like want to get involved in Islamic activism. And then I joined, coming to uni in 1998, and got involved in the ISOC. And that was an amazing experience. And that's when I started getting involved in organizing events. We had a number of high-profile speakers that we hosted, and alhamdulillah, we were very successful getting shahadas and all that kind of stuff. So our ISOC was very active. And
Maroof,
yeah.
what was your biggest or best event whilst you were at ISOC, just to give us a kind of like a flavor of how old you are?
So remember, I was in the unis in the late 90s. So there weren't that many English-speaking speakers in UK that were available. We hosted all the popular speakers that were there from America and Canada. So Dr. Shabi Ali, Imam Ziaullah Khan, and every high-profile speaker that was available at the time, with probably exception of Sheikh Hamza Yusuf.
And how did you kind of, because this is an interesting point you mentioned early on about you saw that Christianity kind of empowered those who kind of studied. And I mean, I think this is an interesting thing for a lot of people, because if it hadn't been for that, for example, like let's say you went back in time and you hadn't, taken up that path of studying Christianity and theology of that, do you think that it would have had an impact on your understanding and approach of da'wah? Or was it going to be something that in university that you would have seen anyway?
So I think I was unfortunate because I got involved in Islamic activism through organizing the events and stuff. And alhamdulillah, we had a very good ISOC body. I mean, like the first Amir of the ISOC when I joined was Azhar, who's now, involved in MEND. So, you already had like very strong personalities involved in our ISOC and stuff, which was very good and influential. But at the same time, at our uni, I started studying. So I saw Sheikh Riyad al-Haq used to do his Bukhari classes back then, and he was in Central Mosque. So I started studying then, and then I also met Sheikh Sharo probably in about 2000, 2001. So I started studying Nure there, and so I had access to Islamic studies at the uni stage. So that's something that really helped, and that kind of switched the whole thing of, I felt that there was a space for me to learn Islamic studies, and that had people question or people who were relevant to, the background I came from and able to deal with issues I had. So the uni thing was amazing. I think the uni thing was a transformational experience, which allowed me to be involved in activism, got me confidence, allowed me to interact with speakers from across the world, and also gave me teachers and mentors in Birmingham that I could study from. So I remember, I was at the time studying from Sheikh Sharo. I was attending Sheikh Riyad al-Haq stuff. Did a Sheikh course, 1 year course with Sheikh Abdullah in Manchester. And I did like a 3-year kind of course with Sheikh Shahab. So I had access at that time, which was very useful. But I think what happened is, having studied Christianity, it was very useful when, like we had Islamic awareness weeks and interfaith events, because, in effect, I knew more than the average Christian did. I mean, later on in life, I've actually trained Christian missionaries, Christian priests, in understanding the evolution of Christianity. So I've done classes, and Naveed's probably aware of this. It's happened in Spark Hill, where I've had people who are like literally Christian priests who have come to learn about how their theology has developed. So that was the benefit of being involved in or studying Christianity at an early age, and also to make comparisons between our traditions and the Christian tradition. I mean, it's simple things that we might take for granted, such as the story of Musa alayhi salam and Asiya being the wife of Pharaoh, whereas in the Judeo-Christian tradition, it's not the wife of Pharaoh that saves Musa, it's the daughter of Pharaoh. And it's a whole different story, angle at that story. So just being able to that was useful. And the other thing which I think was useful is I think some well-intended Muslims, when they're trying to dialogue with Christians, present a very simplistic version of Christianity, which isn't clear or accurate. So if you're a Christian with any kind of clout or understanding, you'd realize that some of these kind of simplistic arguments that Muslims put are very weak. And you would backfire. I can just imagine some of these people in like Hyde Park Corner, if they met a Christian who kind of knew their stuff, they'll be rinsed in minutes.
Like, you got an example?
You know, they'll do simple stuff like, if your Bible is holy, then in chapter so and so it says 7,000 men went to full battle, but in so and so chapter talking about the same incident, it says 8,000. So if your book is holy, is it 7,000 or is it 8,000? So there's a contradiction. But it's not like, remember, and I think this is a great misservice that Muslims probably do, is comparing the Bible to the Quran. There's nothing that compares to the Quran. The best that the Bible can compare to is our Sunnah, the Hadith traditions, because it's they don't believe that the Bible came from Jesus, right? They don't believe it was a revelation from God to Jesus. They believe that this is something that people were inspired to write afterwards. So in effect, they're historical accounts by people who never met Jesus afterwards, in effect, similar to what Bukhari and so forth is. So just like we might have a hadith that says it's 21 times more rewarding to pray Salah in Jama'ah, and another one that might say it's 27 times rewarding. It's not a contradiction. The emphasis is that it's great to reward to pray in Jama'ah. And likewise, when something in the Bible says that 7,000 people attended a battle or 8,000, the point isn't the numbers, but the point is to show that there was a large number of people who took part in the battle. And any Christian theologian would understand that's the point being made. Not the number games. So if you're trying to prove that your religion is right and our religion is wrong based on the number games, just like it's very immature, isn't it? It's like trying to look at the Hadith tradition and find loops or falls in that. So it's not really, these kind of arguments are very immature.
Yeah, I mean, that totally makes sense to me because, I don't really have too much of a reading into Christianity. I mean, I've listened to a tafsir of the Bible, half of the Bible. Yeah, one of these YouTuber American, there's loads of them who are explaining the Bible. Yeah. And there was one that kind of goes through it. And I was actually at one stage, I was learning Hebrew to actually read the original, the Old Testament. And I was trying to learn the Hebrew alphabet, and I was trying to kind of figure out, that famous kind of statement that they always quote, that the Prophet Prophet's name is in the Torah.
Yeah.
And I was trying to look for that exactly, where it is and how do you pronounce it and is it correct. But yeah, I mean, what you're saying about it totally makes sense to me because, when Muslims don't understand that their own texts have sort of like what we call mushkilat al-hadith. There's a whole section called mushkilat al-hadith. Scholars have written volumes of books just on contradicting hadith and how do you reconcile between them. So it's easy for someone like, these Christians that present their religion in a particular way, for them to just turn around and just say, well, your hadith has got these contradictions, and without them trying to reconcile between them. So I think, that's something which... Yeah, so, okay, so the other thing was, so after this, there's quite a few people here. There's someone asking a question here as well, Mullah. He says, do you think the idea of having to represent Islam had an effect on your motivation to practice more and become better?
So definitely at school. So at school, I was a minority. I was like one of 6 people that were Muslims and probably only one of 2 people that were practicing. So when you're a minority, you feel a greater need to protect and represent your faith, and also fight for, whatever you believe to be your rights at the time. So stuff like, wanting to pray and so forth. So definitely, I believe that being the minority Muslim there, and not taking your faith for granted, and wanting to excel even in in studies of secular liberalism and Christianity and so forth to show that, you know, I as a Muslim can deal with this. That was definitely a motivation. That definitely helped on the journey. Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. And Mullah himself, I mean, used to be part of the ISOC as well. So I think when I started giving talks in the ISOCs as a guest scholar, one of the things I did find was that there seems to be this internal motivation that ISOC members have that you don't tend to find after ISOC or maybe before ISOC. So I don't know, that those few years of university as well, I think it's a very inspiration for a lot of brothers and sisters out there who are trying to find Islam, who are trying to make sense of how Islam fits in with the, you know, the secular world and all that.
Yeah. My personal opinion is ISOC is the most fertile, or uni time is the most fertile ground to do dawah. It's the best time you're ever going to have, because it's a time when you're developing your views and outlooks on life. You're not working. You're not married. You don't have kids. You don't have those kind of responsibilities, and you're young enough to do some crazy stuff. Like, you know, when you're older, you know, like, just say it's much more difficult to convert to Islam when you're older. When you're young, you're just like, you're rebellious. You're like, yeah, okay, I'm convinced, I'm going to do it. And then you're happy to, you know, you just give up your studies and learn Islam or do whatever. You'll take more risk. But when you're older, you're like, yeah, I need to make sure I get a good job. You know, I can't give this up. What's the impact of this on my career? What's the impact on my family and my kids and all that kind of stuff? So definitely uni time is
interesting, that point where you mentioned there. I just want to add, I was actually on the weekend, I was speaking to this marketeer, and he was doing some work for me, and he he said psychologists have actually done studies on primates, and they found, you know, relative to the human, the age span of a human, if you look at it in a primate, the age between 18 to 25 is the time where the primate makes his choices, and then after 25 he sticks to that. So whatever choice he makes, so what these big companies are doing is they're targeting a lot of the advertisements to this age. And so this guy's a Muslim, and he's saying to me, basically what Muslims need to do is they need to figure out that at the age of 25 and 26, your average Muslim guy is going to invest in his mosque, and he's not going to invest in any other mosque more than his mosque, or he's going to invest in his little maktab down the road, and, you know, no other. So, you know, this kind of like age at that particular time that we have. So that obviously them guys, they kind of like want to make more money in capitalism and want to benefit from, you know, their brand, you know, being embedded in the person's customer's mind. But it's interesting because, you know, does a person really become motivated, like Islamically, academically, want to learn about Islam, want to understand Islam, debating? Do we get debaters who actually start off after 25? Do we get this kind of like debating da'wah kind of scene coming around after 25? So yours is an example of way earlier. You know, you became, you know, practicing way earlier. I mean, I became practicing at 18, 19, and through like Tablighi Jamaat. So it was like Tablighi Jamaat was that kind of thing that kind of spurred me to start practicing. And then, you know, I went to madrasa and I started studying. I don't know, Naveed and Altaf, I don't know what age. Was it similar, 18 to 25? That kind of time? And do you think you kind of stuck to that kind of, after 25, wherever you are on 25, 26, you stuck to that kind of?
No.
You changed?
Yeah, I think you develop in it. It's like you become a bit more mellow, you become a bit more relaxed in your opinions, in your views.
No, I mean, I'm not saying how your views, but I'm saying in the branding. So like the sort of like scholar that you look up to after the age of 25, 26, you kind of like look up to them all the way throughout. You don't really kind of...
I don't know. I think for me it's kind of changed a little bit. So there's certain scholars that have stayed there. And then there's certain ones that kind of like have dwindled away, and other ones who've come into prominence, because I find what they say is more in tune with where probably I'm at, as opposed to kind of like just sticking to one. I don't know. I find it very difficult to kind of. after being involved in lots of events and activities, Maroof, have you ever found to yourself that you become despondent or disinterested in talks because you've just been around so many?
Yeah, well, there's two things. So the only thing that, so after uni, I was heavily involved in DAWAH and more closely working with the speakers and so forth. And if there's ever anything that's put me off DAWAH per se, or being involved in Islamic activism, it's actually getting to know some scholars and speakers or these public-facing figures. So there's two things. Is
that because you see the invoice?
the invoice is a whole nother game, but some of these people have they're very different people than what you'd see on TV or YouTube and so forth. I mean, I'll give you an example. I think this is probably a common example that people know about. There's once this guy who was volunteering with a charity, and he was driving one of these sheikhs around. It was a sheikh that was visiting from America. And this particular sheikh had very, big requirements, and it was just very difficult. So this guy takes him to, is taking him to whatever the events are and all that kind of stuff. And then they've given a speech in a place that's it's like a small town somewhere. And the sheikh is he drinks coffee from only, I think it's Starbucks or something. And there was no Starbucks in that town. So he made that volunteer go to another town. He spent about 15, 20 miles traveling to another town to go and get Starbucks coffee for him at night, just so that he's happy and all that. Anyway, he did that happily without any complaints. And, so on the way back, he met another, there's two sheikhs on the tour, but there were two doing different cities. So they were going on a joint trip somewhere. And they didn't know that the volunteer knew Arabic. So this sheikh is saying, these organizers, they're a bunch of jokers. They don't know, they don't look after you. They don't feed you well. They don't get you coffees. And he's really slagging off that particular volunteer in Arabic, thinking that he doesn't know Arabic. And this guy, he just was totally breaking inside. He did everything he could to make the sheikh happy. He went out of his way. He ticked all the boxes, and he's not even being paid to do this. It's not even his job or anything. And yet the sheikh's really discontent. And this is after staying in a 5-star hotel and everything else. So it's stuff like that you don't expect. I
like how you casually dropped in. That's after staying in 5-star hotels and flying business class.
Yeah, so I'm trying to give a context. So you could say, okay, maybe the sheikh was upset because he was put in a 2-star hotel and this coffee thing was something else. What I'm trying to say is that the sheikh would have had a really good experience. He was staying in posh hotels, was getting paid in the thousands. He was being pampered totally. And just something like a delay in getting the coffee because you have to go to another town to get it, which is no one's fault. He's exaggerating and slagging off the driver, thinking that the driver doesn't know Arabic, right? So that could have easily turned that brother away from practicing people or ulama or anything like that. So that's just an example of things that can really put you off. And you see more and more of these kind of things. When you interact with them, you'll find a sheikh that's talking everything about spirituality, right? Saying this world is temporary, you shouldn't worry about the possessions and all that kind of stuff. And it's making it totally making it look like it's not materialistic. And then you say, okay, say they're on a tour for 5 days and they've been paid, I don't know, £2,000 a day or whatever. And then you just say, since you're here for Jummah, would you mind doing Jummah? And they're like, well, that's an extra activity, so I'm going to charge you another £1,000 if you want me to do Jummah. It's but you're going to go to Jummah anyway. It's just that kind of stuff. It's so you've just talked about doing things for the deen, volunteering your time, making sacrifices, and now you want to charge either a small masjid or an ISOC £1,000 to do Jummah after you've been paid in the thousands anyway. So it's stuff like this.
Was the talk about abstinence?
He was teaching Kitab al-Zuhud, Mufti Sab.
Once, yeah, I wouldn't say who it is, all right. was giving a talk on the example they use is, look, if you go in a hotel, you wouldn't worry about, buying new furniture for the hotel and so forth, because it's a very temporary place. You're only there for a day and so forth. And this dunya is like a hotel, so you should treat it like, a hotel, not worry about things. You're just going to sleep there at night, that kind of stuff. And the same person's like, I want a 5-star hotel that gives me this kind of view of Birmingham.
But come on, Maroof. Little did you know that there are different types of hotels. Which hotel was he?
Look, I love Birmingham as much as the next guy, but if you said there's a view of Birmingham, I was like, I'm not really sure that exists. Should have sent him to Sparkbrook by now.
I think these kind of things, I think these are very disheartening for a lot of people when, people look up to like speakers and, you hear these kind of things regarding them. I think for two reasons personally. Number one is, although, fatwa, matwa, whatever someone wants to pull out and say, well, he's not in the wrong technically. He's giving his services and he's charging for it, whatever. But I think the main sort of problem is that people have this kind of like image of the scholar in a certain way. And, the scholar themselves should hold themselves, up to the expectations of people as well. And that's why I think, in my days, I hardly came across any scholars before I started studying. It was only the scholars that I came across were Sheikh Riyad al-Haq. I attended a few of his talks in Central Mosque. Sheikh Zahir, probably, actually not even Sheikh Zahir. I hardly even knew him then. And maybe, it was probably those two only. And it was like, in Central Mosque outside when they used to have those cassettes, those pirated cassettes, that were like copied like so many times. And there was like, everyone selling them and you listen to them, Hamza Yusuf and others. So it's like, I think if I had seen those before I'd gone studying madrasa, I don't know, maybe my sort of like image of scholars would have been very different. But I can imagine like I don't know, did it have a big impact on you? Or did you kind of just think to yourself, you know what, just there's a bigger goal here, let's just carry on?
So I went through various stages of how I dealt with these kind of things. So in my early 20s, I was very like, you could say, my thing was very black and white. In the early 20s, it was just like, this is an Islamic thing. I'm volunteering my time, people are volunteering their time, just like a sheikh's volunteering time. So I understand covering costs and giving them a little gift and stuff. But if you're, sometimes they give you like these application forms or contracts to fill in, which say, this is the only kind of hotel we stay in, this, X, Y, and Z. It's like a whole contract. And by profession, I'm a procurement specialist, so I write contracts. So whenever I had somebody who sent me a contract, I get them to sign my contract, right? So what they try and do is in their contracts try and get them covered, and a few extra bucks here and there, or get things. So I would do exactly the same, right? So if there's something that they didn't comply to with my contract, I'd be like, you're not having that. I'll give you an example. So there, like sometimes we've hosted some nasheed artists, right? So they'll be like, okay, this is our fees and this is how long we'll perform on stage, etc., etc. So agree, right? So we agree the fee, right? So the fee's agreed. Then they're like, can you put our logo on your leaflet and let's have a stall to sell our CDs? Now, this is something that I would not have a problem with, but because they've been so awkward with it, I'm like, it's not in the contract. So you have to pay me for the stall and you have to pay me for that. And by doing that, they ended up paying me more than I was paying them. So they say if the fee was like £500, I was charging them like £700 for the stall. So it's just like, they were being a victim of their own doing. So, there'll be stuff like that. So when I was younger, I was, very like, I didn't care about maintaining. If they were a dealer, kind of a sheikh or artist, then, I'll treat them as a dealer. Right. So,
someone from Aston.
Yeah.
Wait, nothing wrong with Aston.
They're not paying the taxes on these honorariums or anything, like these are like stipulated fees which are untaxed. So, So these illegal workers, I would treat them as illegal workers. But then if you were like a sheikh who was like, like I've got on the other side, there's some really positive examples. I'll go out of my way to look after them, give them like people who would never take money, and I'd force them to take money and stuff. And those kind of people I would develop a relationship with. So it really depends at what stage. And with the bad, there was also good. So while there were bad examples of these wheelers and dealers, there were sincere people who always kept me going and inspired me and gave me hope. So it wasn't all bad. And when it came to contracts, it was like I knew what I was getting into, and more often I would have a better hand than they would if it came to writing a contract.
I think kind of like there's certain sheikhs that would charge and stuff that you wouldn't mind paying, because it wasn't like onerous on you the whole journey of that person. So like they would basically deliver their talk, you'd pay a fair amount, or some didn't charge, and those are the kind of ones that you would get on with, like you'd understand and you could build a relationship with. I always found the ones that were really difficult to get on with were the ones that like you had a protocol. Did you ever get sent that, Maroof? Like you get like a protocol that like of all the expectations that you have to adhere to.
Yeah, so I normally sent that in my early years, and then that was me when I was young. So I'd write a whole essay telling them how it's haram and how they're un-Islamic and like they need to fix up and stuff. So in my later years, I haven't really had that kind of stuff. But I did that in my early years. I had people who said like,
I think you've lived up to your name. You are Maroof. You become the well-known, the well-recognized one.
SubhanAllah. I think it's interesting because you were involved in quite a wide array of events, like massive events as well, mashallah, that we saw over the years, like UMC and stuff like that.
Well, what's the kind of numbers that UMC started off with, and what did it
peak at?
bring in now?
Our first year, the first year we did UMC was 1,400. The second year was 2,500, and then it fluctuated between 3,000, 3,500 until 2012. 2012, I think we peaked at 4,200, and then it's been on a decline since. So it was like 3,000, 2,500. Now it's gone down to, like, I think not this year. We haven't done it this year, but last year we probably just about scraped 1,000, if that. So the numbers now are declining. So our peak numbers were probably 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So it's probably declined since 2016.
And that seems to be something that's across the board, the declining of numbers and events, because I've seen it a lot in talks where Central Mosque used to hold big events, and in the early sort of like late 90s, and now it's like the same type of themed events. If you go there now, it's like hardly anyone's there. I personally have my own sort of like theory on these kind of things. I mean, I think UMC is different. I've never been to a UMC event, never been to one. But I've seen the sort of.
Well, I'm not surprised.
I haven't I haven't received the email from Maroof, with a policy and contract.
They give the protocol. That's what it is.
So I think
You've
my
not been
theory.
able to afford your fees.
Mufti Saab, now they've got now they've got your numbers already.
Allah.
So now you can go. Now they got like 20 people turning up.
Shaban was on here as well earlier. I don't know if he's still here. He was saying, nice to see you, Amir al-Mu'mineen Maroof. He's already given you that title, bro. Yeah. So I think, going back to what we were saying, I think the main sort of like thing that's happening now is, a lot of these kind of sort of events and talks, they're just attracting a certain type of crowd. And then that crowd, there's a certain age that they attend these events. And then once that sort of like dies out, it's like, you have to kind of evolve with times. So now, especially with COVID-19, you've seen this happen now, because now it's like, because I work at Sufa, I've seen that, previously people were not very interested in studying online. They weren't really serious about studying online, except for the really like serious ones. But now what's happened is because people have been forced to actually move online, it's like people are thinking, okay, it's actually comfortable. I can study online, right? But now that kind of means that, okay, it's like, all right, so what does it mean for the local masjid? What does it mean for the events that the local masjid tries to set up for the community? Do you just sit at home and just watch it online? Is there like some sort of like a thing that you should bring them to the masjid? Is there this? So I think people previously didn't see that kind of importance of this gathering, idea of gathering, and having a scholar there. Do you need to have a scholar now where you can actually just listen to a scholar anywhere around the world? So I mean, I don't think UMC was like that, because you guys used to attract all backgrounds of audience. But a lot of the other ones, they're dying. Guys are dying. So like, even like organization like Al-Maghrib, Al-Kawthar, these kind of places. I spoke to some people who are involved in them. They were saying the same thing. Within the past 10 years, they've really evolved in their events, how they're doing their events, and the types of events they're doing, and the sort of like shifting from on-site to online as well. So I don't know. Are you guys thinking of shifting it online?
So UMC is just one of the programs we do. It's probably like we do many more during the year. So UMC is like what I would say our benchmark. It's probably what we're probably most known for. But there's various other activities we do. But there's been a change in the Dawah scene, or evolution of the Dawah scene over the years. And that kind of dictates what kind of events happen. So if you look at back in the 90s, most of the people that were delivering events, or the kind of conferences that were going, they just simply wouldn't happen now. So there's a number of things. I think the Dawah scene is now become much more commercialized. So whereas historically the Dawah scene was there generally for the Dawah, or to invite people to your ideology kind of thing. So if you look at the most active kind of groups in the 90s, early 2000s, there would have been like the Jamaat-based groups, like UKM used to have their annual conference in West Brom. I think the Bethel Convention Centre, even the HTs used to get like massive numbers. They had NIA, they would book London Docks. IFE, YMO would have massive conferences in Wembley and so forth. GPU used to put in about 25,000 people, and that used to be like every year.
These are just all acronyms to us.
GPU was a big event.
Global Peace in Islam Channel's big conference.
They used to be huge, man.
That was massive. That was like 25,000 people that would come. But they used to do it every year. Then they couldn't maintain it every 2 years. Then it was like once every 5 years, and they've stopped. HD used to have Hizb ut-Tahrir used to have large conferences. UKM, Jamaat Islami version of UK, they would have massive conferences. There used to be Quran Expo at Aston Villa Leisure Centre back in the day by ISB. They used to put in a couple of thousand. IPCI used to get really good numbers in the 90s. They would, like on a weekday, they would pull in 700-800 people in Rec Centre. But none of these organizations now can pull off programs or conferences at that scale. So it's died off. And it's also died off because these were kind of like, I would say, Dawah ideological organizations. The kind of Dawah organizations, or the kind of organizations that deliver events, are one of two types. They're charities who are trying to make money. So it's a kind of a commercial endeavor. They're not really that concerned about the Dawah that's coming out. They just want bums and seats in order to fundraise, right? And that's another reason why people would, I hate going to events now, because I know there's going to be like 45 minutes to an hour, which is going to be just fundraising. Whereas I know where I want to give my money to. I'm not going to go to an event and want to fund, I'm not going to end up pulling for somebody standing on stage giving an emotional spiel with some, picture that's been photoshopped from Africa or something. So all these events have been become kind of fundraising.
Oh, wait. I think one of the charities took him off.
Allah.
It wasn't me.
Naveed just kicked him off the chat. He was just like, I'm not having any of this anti-charity talk.
They don't actually fundraise at one of my events.
This was Naveed just doing his kind of that halal telepathic thing.
I think I think when it came to like when he was talking about events and like them becoming really commercialized, I think he like made a massive point because we would do those events as well, but I'd hate going to them. Like literally, Musab, like you go to the event and you knew that there's going to be a fundraiser at some point. You know, in the first couple of years, it was all right, and then it just everything you go to. Everything you go to your friend's house to eat some food, and suddenly there's a fundraiser. Then you're like, "Where did you come from?" I just came from DAWAH.
Was that in his front room?
Think about the meal. Think about what you're having. What if I was to tell you that you? Okay, anyway.
Yeah, I think that we just needed to chill out a bit with that kind of stuff. But what happened is that because we didn't know any other way to raise money, we just thought if there's people there, let's ask them. And the more emotional the story is, the more likely we're to take money from them.
You know, I mean, I'd like to ask Maroof his opinion on this whole like where is everything heading? Because you know, if there's been this sort of like in the 90s and late 80s, 90s, you had these big, large events taking place, and where is all this kind of like going? Because a lot of it was novel, and clearly a lot of the prime sort of motives for it were, we assume they were good. But there must have been like certain things which obviously has to sustain it. So there has to be funding, has to be something important. You can't run organizations on volunteers all the time. There has to be an element of people being paid, full-time workers, like you see in some of these certain organizations where now they're starting to have it more organized. But that's one thing, and the other thing I think is that where is all this leading to now? So if, for example, like commercialization of scholars or talks or these events is something that people... Oh, he's back. Okay, excellent. He's back.
Your battery died, yeah?
Yep. Top. So I'm not sure if it's echoing.
No, it's fine.
No, it's fine.
Oh, well, it is echoing.
Okay, there is an echo.
What you might do, have you got earphones or something?
Yeah, my earphones is not going to help the echo, is it?
So what's
Using
happening
the
is
mic.
from your speakers, the sound's coming, our sound, and it's going back into the mic. Okay, so anyway.
on your settings, Quad, you might be able to knock the the echo off on the advanced settings.
Okay. Is that any better?
Yeah, so if we speak, does it come through?
Perfect, yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Altaf, you are the technician for today.
Maroof,
You have one first.
Mufti Saab was just talking about funding the events themselves and whether people should be employed or whether people should charge for these events, etc. And I remember you yourself, obviously, you hold your principles very dear to you. You've never ever charged for an event, ever, since I've known you anyway. Other than that one trip, but that was obviously people covering their own flights. Other than that, no one actually paid for Al-Hikmah event ever, from what I can remember anyway.
I've never charged, or we never had a policy for charging for any of our events. They've always been free, a bit like NHS, free at the point of service. So it's for reasons. Number one of the reasons for that, I never want finance to be a barrier between somebody being inspired or learning. And as much as events are, they're ticketed, but if you can't afford it, contact us. Most people are going to be too embarrassed to say, I can't come for free, right? And I personally know people who have not gone to courses they would have gone otherwise, or gone to lectures that they would have gone to otherwise if it wasn't ticketed. So I know people, this is not one or two examples, I know a number of people, especially at the age group where most of these kids, like uni, college kind of students, who programs because they can't afford to do so, and they would be too embarrassed to let the organizers know or approach it through that angle. So So that's one of the reasons. And, you know, like, it's always been that avenue would be used. I mean, it's not an avenue that you would ever expect the Sahabas or the beloved Prophet to have used, you know, in order to charge people abide by Islam or learn about Islam. So that's been, you know, the main reason. Secondly, the audience that most of the events that I've been involved in that we market our program to are people who aren't necessarily already hardcore practicing. So I'm not that who's, like, for example, Altaf would not be a prime target to an event that I organize because he's generally with ulama, generally practicing. You know, he'll know where to go for if he had any inquiries or study. I'm targeting your average, you know, just an average Muslim who's got love for Islam in their heart, but isn't seen to be religious, right? And those kind of people are even more unlikely to be paying because you're trying to bring them in, isn't it? So these are people who are like watching Bollywood films or, you know listen to music, they don't wear hijab, they don't have beards.
We're trying to say like, practicing people don't watch Bollywood films.
You know, I'm trying to reach out to because in their heart they would have a passion for Islam, but they've just never been in that environment or had that opportunity or, you know, had access to speaker or ask them a question. And it's like, if I'm targeting people like Altaf, I'm like preaching to the converted, isn't it? Like, I want to tell Altaf.
I was going to say, Maroof, I used to have somebody I used to go to questions with, but he doesn't answer them anymore. Even when I go on his live stream, he doesn't answer them there. When I WhatsApp him them questions, he doesn't answer them anymore. He pretends he's sick as well, and he's just like, you know, wears a topi and a blanket around himself. Nav, have you found the same problem?
I know there's one scholar, mashallah. I'll refer to him as a scholar because, mashallah, he's very, very well read. He doesn't like answering questions, but he does a Q&A on a Friday. Yeah, anyway.
You know, okay, all right, guys. So let's ask this question, yeah? So when it comes to like things like events like UMC, yeah, there has been a lot of people who have like said to me, oh, these kind of events, there's a lot of free mixing going on. There's a lot of things that seem to go against what the talks are all about. Yeah, and these are people who have said this to me. I've never been to a UMC event, but I know people have said these, and I know Sheikh Zaid, you know, he used to deliver talks there as well. And sometimes, like, you know, people would say, how can Sheikh Zaid give a talk with this particular speaker? You know, they've got this background, and there's like women attending there with no scarves on or whatever. But what you're saying here, actually, it kind of makes a person, you know, think to themselves, well, look, you know, who's actually going to cater for a community? Are you just going to cater for one particular genre of the Muslim community, one particular class of the Muslim community, preaching to the is it preaching to the choir? Yeah. So, you know, are you just gonna, you know, preach to the same audience again and again? And I've actually I know what you're talking about, because like a lot of my family, they're not practicing, but I know if there is just an event that someone says, like, to my mom or something, that there's an event, Islamic event, she'll quickly go. Like, you know, something for her to listen to in Urdu or whatever. And she won't be into all of this kind of, oh, there's free mixing there or anything like that. She'll just go because she just wants to listen to. And at the end, she'll feel as though she's done something good in her heart. Like, you know, she's achieved something. And I think a lot of people tend to sort of like dismiss that. They kind of, you know, throw the baby out with the bucket. And when they see these kind of events, and then they don't see how much effort goes into sort of the planning it and bringing the scholars and then putting them in the hotels and buying them the Starbucks, and, you know, people don't see all this. But what they see is, for example, like they'll see like a very conservative type of event, very, very conservative type of event, and then they'll measure every event out there. And I saw this in Pakistan, because I remember when I was in Pakistan. Yeah, said it.
Oi.
Said it.
You couldn't get through one episode without doing that Mufti Saab.
You haven't been through an episode where Mufti Saab hasn't quoted something that's happened in Pakistan.
So, before you guys start having a rant at me, yeah, let me just finish in my my throat. So what I was saying is, in Pakistan, like if you go to the events in Pakistan, you'll be shocked to the kind of events that people have, like the kind of sort of like type of people that attend certain types of events. It's very different types. Over there, you have all sorts. You'd have Salafi, you'd have Brailvi, and then even amongst the Salafi, you have all different types, and then Brailvi and Deobandi, and then you'll have just like a liberal sort of like approach to Islam in Pakistan as well. Whether you agree with or disagree, that's a separate thing. But the idea is that people are trying to cater for different communities out there. Now, if someone wants to turn around and say, well, Brother Maroof is, a deviant and he's encouraging, all of this, that's difficult to say. I mean, you can't just, make a judgment on just because such and such is happening in an event, which means that, therefore, the organizers of the event are trying to, promote this type of sort of like, things to happen. So do you get like backlash? Do you get people like mention these things to you, Maroof?
No. So when we started off in the early 2000s, we'd have some people that would have issues with like the lack of segregation in our events. What helped us is so when we deliver.
Oops.
You've frozen, Maroof.
He's gone Muraqaba mode. Yeah, Muraqaba. Oh, it could be a ploy here. He's pressing a button so that he avoids the question.
It's a really good way. Just got. I think the thing that you asked him, Mustafa, was like about. When you were speaking about UMC, only thing that went through is one of my memories, that Second City Suite. There was an event there once, and after an Nasheed artist, there was another sheikh that did a talk, and his talk was so fiery that the speakers went out after halfway through the talk. So about 5 minutes before Maghrib, the speakers just blew, and we literally had to kind of, that's the end of the event. Good night, go home.
That was the trick. That was all the plan, guys.
Let me just message Maroof just in case he carries on speaking.
I think he's refreshing his screen now anyway.
Yeah, I think his signal, the internet signal. Yeah, but what I think the point that I think it's important for a lot of people to understand is you don't just make a black and white statement or judgment, just based upon certain like disposition that you hold. Right, because you're not aware of what's happening out there. There could be like, I've been shocked sometimes. Like, someone's, for example, like let's say attended a Sufa talk, yeah, and like not practicing anything at all, yeah, just attended randomly, and then later on they've come to me and said, you know what, how I started? I started because I just saw a poster or something or just talk. I didn't pray anything. I just came down. I didn't feel intimidated or anything, and I attended. And I just after that, I started practicing. And you can imagine how much it would be in the situation with a lot of women as well. So the women sort of like audience that we have out there, our sisters, our aunties, our mothers, our daughters out there, who don't really have access to like don't have access to this, not just like speakers, but also this sort of like atmosphere. Because some people say, oh, well, they say, put Islam channel onto them. Yeah, if they want to, well, you watch Islam channel, you see how long you're going to last in front of the TV. To be honest, it's boring. Watching the TV all day, you can't compete with Hollywood. You can never compete with Hollywood, right? You're trying to use the means. They are at the cutting edge of technology. And the Muslims are, still like, 100 years behind in trying to make their programs. So it's like,
I had a good example. It's like they're on Hollywood and we're still on 1990s wedding videos with the Barbados background. The three people that go around in circles.
So I think that's where we tend to fail, because we're kind of like forcing it down people's throats that you should like this. There is this, this particular channel or this particular organization. You should like this. You should, make them watch this. They don't need to go out their houses, or they don't need to attend these events. And in most of the situations, it's like the female in the family is usually the one who is, is usually the one who is the more spiritual. You generally find this. I don't know if you guys experience this as well. And it's like,
I'm not a woman, so I've never experienced it. But...
there's more ways than one to skin a cat.
Mufti Sahib is really brave today because he's not sitting next to his wife while he's speaking.
Touche.
She's not watching him over the shoulder saying, Nav, what are you saying about women and men?
Yeah,
but you know what Maroof was saying about, like even the kind of criticism that you come across about UMC. Obviously, I was volunteering for the organization. I heard all these all the time. But what Maroof did, he tried to bridge the gap in the sense that when people are going to be engaging in some level of Islamic content, where is someone most likely going to go? Imagine somebody doesn't wear hijab. Do you expect the sister to go to like a talk in like an Islamic girls' school or something like that? Or do you expect it to go somewhere where there's some talk taking place, there's also like an Islamic influenced or a Middle Eastern influenced bazaar or something like that? Naturally, she's going to go for the second option. And that's what Maroof capitalized on without actually capitalizing. Obviously, there's no money involved, but that was the thing. Maroof, the whole purpose of, well, not the whole purpose, I'd say majority of the events that were put on by Al-Hikmah were for that audience, for that first stepping stone. You gotta remember, it's not an Islamic university or like even though you did like courses and stuff like that, it's not for your serious students of knowledge, if you know what I mean, or people taking that path. It was more of a stepping stone. And I think that's one of the main reasons why Maroof never even charged. Because he knew, like, at the end of the day, what I'm providing for people is their baby step, basically. And I personally think, like, to have that ajr, as opposed to, don't get me wrong, people that are putting on courses and everything, that's fine. But those people are already practicing. Imagine you're the person responsible for making them, even if it's a little Islamically inclined in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, just before someone kind of like accuses me of heresy and all the other fatwas, what I'm saying basically is that people like Maroof, who are, I know Brother Maroof, I don't know him as well as Naveed. Yeah, Naveed knows him better. Upright people who pray their 5 times salat, people who try to practice the deen as best as possible. But at the same time, it's like living in the UK as a Muslim itself is a big challenge. At the moment, we don't have in the UK, we don't have like this structure or infrastructure for Muslims to be able to preserve their faith. Like, we have nothing, if you think about it. It's just like everyone's trying to do their own makeshift sort of, thing to try and, okay, let's protect people's iman. And we've realized this when, for example, like recently certain sort of legislations were starting to come into play that were going to affect masjids and maktabs and things like that. The RSC in the schools and all that. I think that was when a lot of Muslims, had a shake-up, because it wasn't the practicing people who were going to have an issue. Those people who were practicing were going to have an issue. The main issue that was going to come, I think, would have been, and maybe, I don't know, maybe Altaf can correct me on this. I think the main thing that was going to happen is the maktab teachers, the masjid, the guys who run the masjids realized that there is far way more people out there that don't come to the masjid and who are not sort of like at the same sort of, on the same journey, on the same level on journey in spirituality as everyone else. And I think that's where, we fail to understand, I was saying in the beginning, about this idea. I don't know, Altaf, what do you?
I think you're right. I think kind of like when everybody started panicking at that point, and suddenly you were seeing consultants come left, right, and center doing child protection policy, safeguarding, and all of these kind of things. At some point, you do think to yourself that people got scared and worried and concerned about that, and they were like focusing on it and trying to make sure that they were compliant, and so that that their madaris or their madrasas could kind of like continue. I think there is this thing about Mufti Sahib about understanding the size and the scale of the issue. So, like, we did a survey at an organization I worked for a few years ago, based on the Muslim community. So, I'll share some of the top line numbers. So, we asked people who paid zakat, right? We asked people who paid zakat how often they pray or how often they visit mosque, just so that you can understand a little bit more about the
Scary
community.
statistics. I remember these, bro. Carry
Do
on.
you remember, right?
Yeah.
So I remember the statistic being like something from those people that paid zakah, and we did it, I think it was about 400 people that were sampled. About 7% said that they visit a mosque for more than once a day. And I think it was something like 15% said they visit a mosque once a month or something. But the numbers were really small, once a week, sorry. The numbers were really small. Some, like most people would say that we are in that region where we attend the mosque in month of Ramadan and for Eid. So that would be the amount of salah that they attend. And you know, when we reflect on our own experience whilst we're growing up, the majority of people fall into that bracket. They either, they either go to Jummah isn't that important for them, but most people will fall in that bracket is Ramadan and Eid, which is why we have a swelling in numbers. So there's a massive audience out there. I would say, some scholars reckon that those people that pray 5 times a day from the total population, they were like, anecdotally speaking, was about 10%. They said at best. So there's this whole massive audience out there, right, that we're just not engaging with. And I think that events like UMC and activities like that, at that stage they worked, and they were really, really helpful and useful. But as Maroof was alluding to, I think the DAWAH scene is kind of like moved on. It's become more on demand. Because the question is this, Mufti Sahib, I'll ask you a question. So, like...
by the way, we've got Maroof back here.
Yeah, I've got a question. Maroof maybe coming to this as well. Is that, the entire madrasa course now, Mufti Sahib, if somebody was to record every single class of the Alamiya course over 6 years, right?
Which someone who does the apparent live stream that doesn't answer people's questions. Go on.
Yeah, you don't answer questions, but they ask you questions at the end, they put their hand up and Mufti Sahib just switches off the stream. That's the end of the lesson. No, but if somebody records it all, the question is that would it be religiously or spiritually acceptable for them to attend that on demand as opposed to attending that live, as long as they had somebody that they could forward questions onto? Because I think that we feel, because we're born in this generation, that there's some spiritual mismatch by not sitting at the feet of scholars. But like in 10, 15 years' time, do you think it's even going to matter?
I mean, let me say something and then we'll leave it to Brother Maroof too. So I think the way things are going, especially in the West, is we have to conform with capitalism. That's the only way organizations are gonna progress. And that's slowly what's starting to happen with, like I was mentioning early on about this idea of shifting online. Shifting online is the new stage now for everything now. A lot of organizations are just telling their employees, just stay at home, right? Just get yourself a good internet system, get yourself good kit, and just everything from home now. And so it's like, okay, so why aren't Muslims doing this? Muslim organizations are saying this. Why aren't we doing this? And so you, on one side, you've got, well, look, they can't turn up, right, because of such and such problems. So rather than them missing out, why don't they just... So now you have some organizations that are saying, let's just shift online totally. And some organizations say, no, let's carry on site as much as possible. And some organizations say, let's do a half and half, right? So let's have at least some sort of like contact time with the teacher on site. And then, it can be kind of supplemented with online work as well. But from my experience, this is what I've seen from my experience, online interaction is not something that is motivation, right? Because for some reason, humans get motivation when they're in an atmosphere. And that only happens when you're with other people. For some reason, the hadith mentions about angels, assembling, around the people who remember Allah and the Quran. And it's like a very specific, if someone interprets it as, well, that can happen anywhere, right? If you're on a virtual sort of, and recently when they were talking about that virtual salat, where Imam can be in a different part of the world, and then it was like, remember there used to be a joke in the 90s that someone asked the imam, can I put the Kaaba, the Haram Salat on TV and then pray behind it? It was funny then, but then now you've got actually some scholars in the world, whether people agree with them or not, who are actually saying, some Arab scholars who are actually saying that you can do Jummah online. It's like now you're trying to think, how far is he going to go then with this whole issue of online? Like, how much spiritual impact is it going to have? So I think clearly it will have a spiritual impact, and it's going to have a big impact on how our culture is going to change. Definitely, that's my sort of. I don't know exactly how it's going to impact the Muslims. Is it going to be something better for them? Allahu alam, I don't know. Yeah, Maroof.
So, with regards to, I'm not sure at what point I got cut off, or so from the previous thing, I'm not sure what you heard about that. But in regards to things moving online, I think it's inevitable that that's going to happen, because that's the way the world is moving, and that's the way you can access a lot of secular education, and you do work meetings and so forth. I don't think it's a good move, though. It's a move that we have to make, because you have to keep up with the times. But I think there's a number of problems. There'll be a lack of spirituality. Number two, there'll be a lack of connection with your teacher or your speaker, or whichever, whatever platform it is. And thirdly, I think it's going to make people lazy. And there's some virtue in making some sacrifice in order to learn your deen or be inspired by your deen. So if you're having everything at your fingertips, you won't appreciate it. I'll give you an example. Back when we started studying, I remember we'd spend hours traveling. Like I would go to a whole day's work and then finish class and drive all the way to Manchester just to have an hour and a half lesson with Sheikh Abdullah, and come back, right? And I know people who would, when there were classes in Birmingham, people who would travel from out of Birmingham in order to attend. And I think there's a certain level of barakah that comes in those sacrifices, and a certain level of appreciation that you would obtain when you make those sacrifices in order to gain knowledge. Now, if you look at it, there's so much Islamic content online. You could literally cover books on Seerah, Fiqh, Usul. Everything's on YouTube. Everything's at the click of a button. People take it for granted because it's so easily accessible. You don't appreciate it. Secondly, it allows lazy people to go and select bits out and only do things they're interested in. And you don't have a mentor there. So I could just go in and find all the controversial things, and that's all I'm interested in, and that's all I'm going to take away from it. Whereas if you're going to a class, you're with a teacher, you have somebody mentoring you, somebody looking out for you, somebody holding you back, asking you to rethink things. You develop a connection with your teachers. So a lot of things that kept me in line is that relationship with the teachers, where they'll remind you of things, pull you into a certain direction, uplift you if you're down, give you direction. You'll miss all that out by moving things online, and you won't appreciate the knowledge because it's at your fingertips. And the other thing is, if you pay for something, you're just like, it's mine now, isn't it? I'll listen to it when I want to. I've paid for it. You don't feel no kind of responsibility or guilt to see a thing through. Whereas if you're going and you're meeting a teacher, and then teacher's making sacrifice to teach you every day or every week, and you're making that sacrifice, you feel the kind of responsibility to actually not only learn but implement what you learn. It's like a continuation. So and I don't know if it sounds too Sufistic or whatever, but I think there's a big spiritual connection.
That's an excellent point you made there. Definitely, I didn't even think about that one.
What's
the
up?
idea of when studying, and your teacher becomes your sort of like the kind of pillar that you fall back on. I think
somebody who keeps you in check, somebody who you could refer to. You can't really do that online. It's not the same thing. Yeah,
definitely. I remember one of my teachers. I used to actually. Obviously, this is the humble hour now, so might as well mention the humble things about myself. So I used to travel once a week to one of my teachers, and it was about like an hour and a half journey, 2 buses I had to catch. So I used to be all alone, just me and him, and he would teach me a book, and he would actually write the whole dars for me. He would say to me, I remember I used to study from him Arabic grammar. He goes, "Is your hand hurting?" And I would say, "No, it's not." He goes, "Oh, it's okay, it's okay. Give me the pen. I'll write the dars for you." So he would write the whole dars for me, and then he would explain it to me. But the thing I found with like studying by him is that you build this sort of like, he used to make du'as for me. He would tell me, I'll make du'a for you. I'm gonna tell my mom to make du'a for you. And sometimes his mom would come in the room. She was like an elderly lady, and she would come, and then she would, like, I don't know, once she put her hand out, and I was thinking to myself, shaking the hand of a woman, this is not allowed, but this is my teacher, and my teacher's not saying anything. Yeah. So what do I do? Do I tell my teacher, look, we can't do this? So then I just shook her hand. Yeah.
Exclusive.
So then later on I found out that, if they're elderly, if someone's elderly, then, shaking the hand is fine. But the thing was, you learn so much on the side. Like, there's so many things, peripheral things that you learn on the side. Not just knowledge. Yeah. It's like the whole character building. Yeah. You kind of put yourself in their shoes, right? Like, if I'm in a situation now, my mind kind of goes to one of my teachers thinking, what would he do in this situation? Like people say, what would MacGyver do in this situation? What would my teacher do in this situation? Is that kind of, that kind of thing? You respect them. But I think, I don't know, because I've never studied like online in that way. I do study like online with some scholars, but we have like a Skype group where we interact, and sometimes we meet as well. But I think you're right about that responsibility, that you're paying for something, and then you're thinking, well, who's gonna check up on me? Who's gonna check whether I've watched it or not?
Musab, I have a question. Sorry, Maroof, carry on.
I was just going to say, I think there's at different stages of your life, the technology could work in. So I think you're at a stage where the use of technology is not really going to negatively impact your learning or your spirituality. But somebody early on in their stage, you won't pick up on subtle points of adab. So, for example, when you're studying from your teachers, not to lean back on something, to be ready before the teacher enters the class. I remember one of our teachers, we wouldn't even open the ring binder because it'd make a click noise when present. So you'd open up your ring paper out, kind of things. The traditional aspects of adab and respecting your teacher, that simply won't be present if it's online. Not eating or not having a drink while you're studying or, with your teacher, all those kind of things would, the etiquette and all that kind of stuff, that's going to be sidelined for a beginner. But these kind of things are okay once you've already engrossed in yourself in a number of years of studies and you're just extending your studies, or, if you're with colleagues and you're discussing ideas, it's different then. But I think for any beginner to just start by virtue teaching, they're going to miss out on a lot of spirituality.
And I think, just to add a comment there, I think that would also be for those who have the luxury of being able to study, face to face with a scholar. And, for many people out there, I know, because of my YouTube channel, I know a lot of people contact me and they tell me their situation, that they literally have like no scholar that they can actually study by, for various reasons. Like, one brother, mashallah, may Allah reward him, immensely, because of the khidmah he does for his father. That guy, he goes, I can't go anywhere because I have to take care of my father. So, these kind of people have different situations. And, Allah rewards people, in various ways. And, He puts barakah in people's ilm in different ways. But yeah, I think, it's a very interesting discussion. Yeah, Altaf, you were saying?
So I was going to ask a question. Like the concept of sacrificing. So sacrificing in the process of learning. Like, is there anything about? I know it makes a logical and rational sense to us in the kind of way that we live. That the bigger the sacrifice, the greater the reward. Is that actually based on anything within kind of like?
Like from an Islamic point of view.
Yeah, from an Islamic point of view, like, does it actually have deep-rooted, or is it seated within there? Is this concept of barakah existing from the sacrifice? Do these things exist, or is this kind of like something that we've built at a later point? Because then you look at the sacrifices of the different imams that you learn about, like Imam Malik's sacrifices compared to somebody like Imam Shafi's kind of sacrifices, and you think, well, they look and they sound different, but they don't seem to have an impact on the level of work they did. So that's trying to square that off in my mind.
I think it's an interesting sort of like point that's raised. I think maybe this would require a podcast in itself. This whole idea of like Islamic cliches that we have and terms, like how are we supposed to see those? Like, to what extent do we have to? Do we kind of like the concept of patience, the concept of mujahada? Like, to what extent do we have to exert ourselves on these, even though we might be in situations where we don't need to, right? So how far should we go? So you have, for example, like the likes of Imam Malik, who in the beginning of his life, the Qadi Iyad mentions that Imam Malik, he said one day, he said, we didn't have anything to eat at home. So what I done was I was going to sell the beam of my house on the roof. That was the only thing I could sell. So he goes, but a day came where Imam Malik says, so much money was coming in, that government was giving him so much money, that he said that every day I could buy a new pair of clothes every day. This is what kind of wealth was coming into him. So, you had that sacrifice over there, and then you have this concept of, okay, well, can someone who studies today in a madrasa, can he be compared to someone who studied, at the time of tabi'in, taba tabi'in, where they traveled a month's journey just to learn one hadith, or can they be compared? Or is it something that we shouldn't exert ourselves? I think this is a whole topic in itself. I don't really have like a full answer for that. But what I do want to mention before we actually move on to the next topic or segment is, I think Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, I think he has made people realize the importance of traveling to study knowledge. I don't think there's anyone else in the Western world who has emphasized so much the importance of studying in the craziest place ever, the middle of the Western, deserts of Mauritania. Yeah, no one even heard of that place. Yeah, but he had given it such importance that I remember I was when I was in Pakistan, Sheikh Hamza Maqbool. So Sheikh Hamza Maqbool actually came there and he was studying something over there. And I met him over there and he was telling me, and he was saying that he was there for a while and then something happened and he had to leave. But it's like, where did he get the inspiration to study there? And then you hear about all these other reverts that are all like trying to move there for some reason to study there. It's nothing special. Like, ilm is not there. Ilm is in many other places. But you get the idea of people do still, have this importance of, you can't get knowledge without sacrifice. But then what does that exactly entail? How does it mean if someone was to study online, let's say, with a sheikh, is that person not going to have the same knowledge as someone who's sat at the feet of someone like Mufti Taqi Usmani, or sat at the feet of Sheikh Murabit al-Hajj, or sat at the feet of Sheikh Dr. Salah al-Hajj, or someone else like that? Would they not get the same knowledge? That's not for us to judge. Yeah, that's up to Allah. Yu'ti al-Hikmah man yasha. Allah gives knowledge to whoever He wants. End of the day.
Sorry to interrupt you. I've got a comment here. It's quite interesting. Weren't you mocking this kind of thing in the last podcast? Like sitting down and learning. We wasn't mocking. We didn't mock that at all.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I think FIFA, mashallah, FIFA is a very interesting viewer. So I know him from before. Don't worry.
No, mocking would be to say that you didn't spell down right.
I think he's misconstrued what he said.
That's mocking,
Yeah, he's misconstrued.
I think it's not. I think it's basically that there's this certain type of thinking where this people put people on spectrums. So they say that because you were saying that you were talking about sitting down and how if that's culturally relevant and stuff like that last week, suddenly now you can't say anything on this side of the spectrum. So you have to, everything you say now has to be somewhere over here. And I think it doesn't work like that because there's nuance in those positions and there's a difference. So studying at the feet of scholars doesn't mean that Mufti Sahib saying that you need to literally sit down at the feet of everybody like that.
I think that was
taking from them. Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a bit different from the way
another good example I'll give you is like Mufti Taqi Usmani. Mufti Taqi Usmani, Mufti Rafi Usmani, they were so privileged. They are from a lineage of scholars. Their father used to actually lock them in the library in the evenings and would privately help them with their work and with their revision and reading and test them, and they had access to like gatherings of like well prominent scholars in Pakistan that others didn't. So it's like that's just a gift from Allah. Allah gives whoever He wants these opportunities, but that doesn't mean that now, you know, Mufti Taqi Usmani is better than all the scholars in the world, or he's less than all the scholars in the world simply because he didn't make a sacrifice. He studied in his own. Basically, his dad owned, you know, the madrasa. He just comes down, studies there, goes back to his house. Yeah, no sacrifice. That's what I'm saying, that this requires a whole thing in itself. But anyway, going back to what we were saying. So last part I just wanted to talk about before we kind of like finish off, which I think Maroof should be able to, you know, really enlighten us with this. What I've seen today, and I personally see it as something which is a very, like a bad path that many unfortunate sort of like online DAWAH men are, sort of like DAWAH people are taking up and adopting this path, which I can tell it's not going to go in the right way, which is this sort of like, you know, argumentative way of putting down, you know, other people online. And then it's like you have your own channel, and then you kind of like come out with these sort of like, you know, accusations against the others. And then you start having these tennis matches with one another, and then debates and all these kind of things. I mean, I personally think that this sort of like thing that's happening in the past, when they used to have the stalls in the city centre, I understand that was simply anyone who's interested would come. If they wanted to have a debate or anything, that's fine. But then now it's actually starting to become recorded, documented, right? And people are using clickbait to try and, you know, accuse such and such a person or such and such. I don't know. Well, what's your thoughts on this, Maroof?
So there's a few issues. This is what you could say a contemporary problem that we have with the advancement of technology and social media, that gives a voice to anybody out there who's, you know, able to gain some kind of following. And the easiest way to get some kind of traction or following is to be controversial. So traditionally, like, in order to get a platform, you need an institution to give you space, like an ISOC, a masjid, a DAWAH organization, and so forth. You couldn't just go out and create your own platform. But now with Facebook and all the other kind of social media, you can create your own platform. Now, this will give people who are not qualified a space to speak, or people who are qualified but traditionally would have been filtered out by the institutions because of whatever the kind of random or shad or, you know, exotic opinions might be. They can't be filtered out now because social media is just accessible to all. So it's given a platform to voices that the Ummah generally would have been saved from. So it's a technology problem. And there's two parts to this. There's some people who I believe are sincere, and in their sincerity, they'll go out and do things and attack people and concepts just because they really believe that they're right in doing so, and they believe they have some kind of like divine obligation to do so in rectifying people and saving the Ummah. Otherwise, it will collapse if they don't warn people against certain people. Then I think there's a second class of people who just love the fame and the following, and they'll be controversial in order to help increase that following. So there are two kind of mindsets here. The latter one is more problematic because there's an element of insincerity to it, which is, you know, people can say, you know, who are we to judge? But you could tell by where they're coming from. And the first one is problematic, not because of the lack of sincerity, but because of the damage it does. So, I mean, like if you look at common day ones, stuff like DAWAH Man, or the current thing between Daniel Hakukichi, I'm not sure he's trying to spell his name, and Yaqeen and Omar Suleiman and Jonathan Brown and all those kind of like online kind of things. So in here, I don't really think that they're being insincere, but they're damaging the greater DAWAH scene, and they're probably damaging themselves even further because people aren't going to take them seriously in the long run. So, and this is the problem with social media. It's like, it's giving them a voice, and everyone's in, you know, like even people who are not religious are interested in what's happening, and the kind of talks that they'll have is clickbait titles of so and so has committed shirk and so forth, and then people are like, oh wow, and then these kind of things will get sent around and so forth. So I think these are one of the dangers that we have with social media and the exposure that it gives to people.
I think the other thing I'd just like to add to that is it kind of like there was a trend before where Muslims were not very confident in being able to explain their religion to other people, right? So you might go to work or something, or you might go college, and some non-Muslim might ask you a question, and you're kind of hesitant to answer that question because you don't know how to answer it, because they might ask 3 or 4 other questions. So I think what's beginning to happen with this kind of mentality is giving confidence, but it's given the wrong confidence. It's given like a sort of like an arrogant confidence to people, which can be justified. Like someone can justify this with verses of the Quran, saying things like, with the Muslims we should be merciful, and with the with them you should be like this. Yeah, with the Islamophobes you should be like this. But then the thing is, like, then you create a culture of youngsters who think, if we can't become scholars, the next best thing we can do is, we just learn a few tricks of the trade of how to debate with people, and then we just start this kind of thing. And I think that is where I think it's slowly going now. It's like kind of creating this misleading confidence inside of people. And then it's like, because I remember once what happened was, Aira once, they came to a sofa once, a long time ago in the old building. So they stayed there for 2 days. I don't know if they still do it. That kind of Tablighi Jamaat thing. Yeah. But Tablighi Jamaat goes to a masjid and stays there for 3 days. But they started doing it as well.
Yeah,
they came to like a sofa. They delivered like a 2-day presentation kind of thing. So I was with one of the guys, and he was from Nigeria. When he's from Nigeria, born in North Korea. Yeah. And I said to him, how does that work? How are you Nigerian, born in North Korea? And he always telling my father's like a diplomat and all that. So his whole presentation on Sunday was going to be about the scientific miracles in the Quran. So he said to me, what do you think about scientific miracles in the Quran? I said, you shall be honest. He goes, I think they're just a waste of time. I said, it's a waste of time. And he goes, what do you mean a waste of time? This is like, someone's written a book on it, Harun Yahya's done this on it, and so. I go, look, the Quran is not a scientific book. Allah is just telling us what our guidance in this book. Whether it conforms with our observations of science or not, doesn't really matter. So when I explained this to him, and I gave him some examples, and the famous ostrich egg, everyone comes out with that one. The ostrich egg, the earth is not round, it's ostrich egg. So that was one of his arguments. And I said to him, look, linguistically, that's wrong. That's not how the word daha means. Eventually, anyway, I spoke to him for about an hour or two. Then he put his head down and he goes to me, my whole presentation I've been giving for so many weeks has been on this. He goes, what do I do now? Shall I just not do a presentation tomorrow? I go, look, if you prepared it, you do it. But maybe you should make a disclaimer to the people that do not pin all your hopes on finding like an ayah which conforms with like a scientific miracle. So what tends to happen, I think, is these da'wah guys, they find something which to them makes sense about Islam, which might be good. It gives them a boost of iman. Like, the famous 2 lollipops. One's covered with a wrapper, one's without a wrapper. Yeah, and it's got flies all over it. Yeah, it's like silly that is, but that's become an argument for them. That's become like a core sort of like dalil to kind of, make them understand that, look, this is why our women cover up. And then you find the guy 6 months later finds a lollipop that's got a wrapper on there, and it's got a fly in there as well. So I think this kind of like that, I don't know, what Naveed and Altaf see of this da'wah sort of like scene. I a lot of people know I totally dislike this, this speaker's corner thing and the da'wah. Yeah, I don't like it at all.
So I just become like proper desensitized to it. I just can't be bothered with it. Like, even I don't think it makes a difference. I think there's there's 2 parts in it. Those that are Like, you know, when you're talking about like the Yaqeen Institute and Omar Suleiman stuff, I don't think anybody really cares about that part of it. Like the DAWAH Man stuff, or whatever they call now, Lightning Man or Flash, whatever they call, them guys on YouTube. Your normal name after Avengers. Let's be honest, and it's gonna be the Hulk soon or something, and the Hadith Hulk or something. They're gonna call himself something weird like that. Them guys on YouTube that like have to use clickbaity titles because they need to get their viewers and all that kind of stuff. I think that's like a problem that's very difficult to overcome. Because we live in that sensationalist environment, you know, everybody wants to see a reaction video to all of these kind of different things that are taking place. I think that's become problematic because in the way that it's got scale and size, and I think combating that's very difficult unless you actually speak to the people that are doing it and try to get them to change, twist, or amend, you know, the way that they're conducting themselves. Because literally all they're doing is they're getting the phone for themselves, putting it in their own faces, recording a video, and just entertaining. Like Junaid's mentioned on there, it's just entertainment now, isn't it? Everything's about entertainment. So those kind of ones, I don't know what the solution is to them, apart from switching off the internet.
I think you're right. I think a lot of them are just like one-man shows. They don't have any sort of affiliation with like a higher body, right? They got no mentors. That's someone that can correct them if they make a mistake. Like, I mean, if, you know, online, that's what online is all about. Is you can do whatever you want, basically. You know, you can be your own person. You can run your own organization. No one can criticize you. And that's another scary thing.
What's up? Have you been out for a test yet?
Wait, what test, bro? I had COVID, I think, in the end of December. You know what I've got now? This is nothing compared to what I had at the end of December. I thought I was dying. 2 weeks I was in bed. And then 3 weeks I had a cough. After that, 3 weeks of cough.
I think you should get a test done with some. You might have to self-isolate in your house and answer questions.
I've been self-isolating all this week.
Musab, you might have to self-isolate and answer questions. That's the first thing that could happen to Musab.
Before I forget, you know, on the subject of clickbait, as much as I agree with what you guys are saying, I think sometimes, you know, there's certain people out there that are, I think, genuinely sincere. Obviously, Allah is the one that judges sincerity, but we are, like, say for instance, we've had Zishan on the show now, Smile to Jannah. Now, he'll tell you the truth, and he'll say, yeah, I'll put clickbait on there because I just give him a very generic message, and I rather attract them with the clickbait because that's the only way that they're going to watch the videos. So from some angles, I get it. Not that I'm saying it's like a blanket statement. I think that, you know, everybody should use them. But even amongst what we call the DAWAH scene, I genuinely believe, even online, amongst these YouTube channels, etc., I know a few of them, and some of them are very, very genuine brothers, and they don't even take a wage from none of this stuff. Like, they have an everyday job, and whatever money they make off YouTube, some of them don't even have adverts, and some of them that allow adverts, they put that into like a charity and stuff like that.
But Nav, I don't think that makes a difference. For me, it's like if they say they don't take a salary from me, I'm like, so what? I don't really care. Like, look how much damage you're potentially doing.
Yeah.
It's not about you making salary and monetizing it and showing us that's form of sincerity from a monetization thing. And actually, when you look at your content, is bogus.
I think the other thing, Altaf, I would say add to that is, you know, I think this idea of sincerity, like us having this kind of soft spot for someone's work, I don't think that is something that we should always fall to. Like I would say, because I'm like in charge of the studies so far, if you don't have someone that's on top of you, right, that's always kind of critiquing what you're doing, I think it's very dangerous to use that sincerity card. Yeah, because that kind of sincerity, you know, can lead anyone off. And I'm thinking, you know, I was about to ask Maroof this. Maroof, how sincere are you, bro? Okay, so now if you make a mistake, is there like, do you have like a board of trustees, or do you have like a panel, or someone, or a mentor, or someone that, you know, you kind of refer back to?
Scrutinized. Yeah. We do internally. We've got an executive board that would hold me to account for any decision before I actually do it. But then I've got mentors or sheikhs that would hold me to account for things that I do, which, you know, they have questions on them. But the process that we follow is that most likely I would have consulted them before doing anything out of the ordinary. So people that I consider to be my mentors or people that I've studied from would already know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. But I'm really, like, our executive board really will hold me to account for anything that I do, or for everything, even if it's a normal thing. Like, I don't even have access to our finances. Just like a whole level of accountability and stuff is to a next level. So I'm definitely held to account.
Alhamdulillah. I think that's how things should run. There should always be people who are, open to criticism, and Anyway, I don't think we should keep Brother Maroof too long now. So, Brother Maroof, is there anything that you want to?
I've got a question for you based on what you said. So, do you see like these people who like will go on YouTube and have these debates, and that you could tell obviously have had no traditional Islamic studies, and they just learned a few tricks of the trade. Would you ever think of reaching out to these people and telling them, look, I appreciate what you're doing. Would you want to come under my wing? Would you have time to engage in some study? Because I think a lot of these people end up here because they have no connection to scholars or ulama, and they probably don't know how to do it. And I think the ball would change if people took these kind of people under their wing and developed them. I know Sheikh Haytham has tried to do this quite a lot with a lot of people in London, and I know a few others have. But I do appreciate that it's the person who needs to come to the teacher to seek, guidance and knowledge and so forth. But when you can see the harm that somebody is doing, I do think that there is scope for ulama to go out and reach out to them and say, look, let's direct your energy into something more positive, or let's help develop your understanding. So, for example, like this Aira person who came with these miracles and all that kind of stuff. So it was very good that you pointed out that there's problems or holes in his narrative of what's happening. But then would you work with him to produce an alternative material that he could then send out for his dawah training and so forth?
I haven't really thought about that. You got me on that one, bro. My car's starting to come back now. My car's coming back.
Conveniently, yeah?
I'm going to go for a test. I'm going for a test, bro.
Because I think when we're critiquing anyone from any side of the spectrum, like if we're critiquing ulama for being of a certain way, or if we're critiquing du'ats, it's very easy to criticize people when you're not there. But then it's very hard to actually reach out and provide a solution. So I could tell you what's wrong with the dawah industry. Can I now go out and provide a solution with it, or counter narrative?
I mean, see, that's my sort of like main motive with my YouTube channel. So I provide free content on there to teach them about Arabic, to teach them about all the science of Arabic, hadith, balagha, fiqh. So that's what I'm doing out there. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I mean, I am not. The problem is, I am not a kind of a person who will reach out to people. So I personally don't believe it to be the right of every scholar to reach out to everyone out there that they critique. So they were like scholars in the past who used to criticize other scholars, but they didn't like kind of just reach out to them and say to them, right, you know what, you want to come under my wing. So I mean, I understand what you're saying, but
so see that's a scholar per scholar. Here you're saying a scholar versus an ignoramus kind of thing, isn't it? It's like somebody who you see doing damage, and you're like, or even if it's not like come and study from me, or have you considered reading this material, or like.
But that's the thing, isn't it? It's like, do I have time for that? Am I gonna like dedicate time now because of all the other things I do? So I think, yeah, maybe there should be, they should obviously be someone who out there who provides a service for people like that who want to learn, yeah, and they need someone who's trained in da'wah as well. So organizations like AIRA, I have no issue with people who work with AIRA because I know there's a body that's kind of monitoring them, yeah, or with like Sapiens, what's it called, Sapiens Institute, or other organizations. I have no issue with that. The problem I have is with these individual ones that are popping up now. How many of them are you gonna try to bring in to your wing? I think that's the issue now. It's going out of control at the moment.
I think the other thing is, Maroof, I think most of these guys know that as well. It's not like it's taking place in like isolation. So they know where their deficiencies are. They know like where they need to work on. They know their own level, and they've probably been spoken to as well. And the thing is that because these guys are like been on for a long time, they've got massive followings and so on and so forth. The thing is with these guys is that the only solution I can think of is you take their phone from them or you like take them off the internet. Like that's the only way that you can stop this, unless you like really get somebody who has the ability to kind of like influence them or affect them. But I think that's about like you having to develop a relationship or having an existing relationship or being a big scholar and kind of like trying to take them under your wing. I know Sheikh Haytham's done like amazing pieces of work on this and gives guidance to quite a few of them or kind of like they lean on him as well, mashallah. So I think that's kind of like probably where you're at with it, but it's a very tough one because what they're doing is just literally flipping a camera back on themselves and just recording themselves and whatever comes out their mouth that week. Or
I have had in the past people like privately contacting me. Like I'm not going to mention channel names, but certain channels, they're not very famous. They contact me and say, "Oh, Sheikh, I want to put this stuff on my channel, or I want to put this. What do you think?" I say, "Look, I think it's wrong." Yeah, I'll say, "Look, I believe it's wrong. You shouldn't be putting this kind of stuff up." So those kind of people, I respect those kind of people who will at least ask someone, "Look, I'm putting this kind of stuff up. What do you think?" So I think they at least have that consciousness inside of them that what, I'm doing this. But then like Altaf is saying, is that some individuals are you going to contact them and they're going to get back to you or they might think you're an innovator or they might think you're a mushrik or whatever, and they might use that as something later on and say, oh, so and so tried to contact me and try to rectify me and I said this, and they use that as clickbait as well, because that's happened in the past as well, where someone might have said something and then a snapshot of the chat has gone viral. Some recent issues that happened with regards to Quran texts. So these kind of things happen behind the scenes. I mean, you might not be aware of it, but these kind of things do happen. But then even that goes out of control, and then that causes problems. These viral leaks. So I think it's a very tricky area. It's not like, going back to the original. You need to have like a strong governing body, right? Whatever you want to call that governing body, in the country, that
a shura
puts limits on it, basically.
An HMC of DAWAH.
Yeah, that's what you need. That puts some sort of like limits and says to some people, you know what, you just sit down, but you can't run a channel.
Musab, you sound like a communist regime.
Yeah, I got my Russian hat on. Anyway, Brother Maroof, do you have any last advice to give the viewers? Anyone who is maybe interested in going into da'wah or interested in working with organizations, what would you kind of advice be to them?
Okay, so if you're getting involved in da'wah, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Don't do it for fame. Don't do it for money. Make sure your intentions are pure. Make sure.
Every time you ask him that question,
short and
he
sweet.
disappears.
I think he was trying to say, if you want to get involved in da'wah, do it for the right reasons and don't join any cutoff.
That's it. Yeah. So anyway, I mean, it's a very tricky area da'wah is. I mean, there's like so many different outlets of da'wah that we have nowadays. The Tablighi Jamaat is a whole topic in itself. It's a da'wah organization and different ways da'wah is given. And even things like masjid, the way masjids are run, like you have the talks in the masjids, the poster designing and all that. Oh, he's back. Yeah. Yeah, Maroof, you were saying?
And he's frozen.
Vic, I got disconnected. Can you hear me?
No, don't worry, man. Don't worry about it. Yeah, tafaddal.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, make sure you for the right intention. Especially young, if you're doing it like your late teens, early 20s, it's quite easy not acknowledge that you're doing it for fame or recognition or following. So make sure your intentions are pure. Always have a mentor or a number of mentors that you run ideas through that keep you into check, and not meant to just agree with everything. People who would challenge you, and of them. So that would include teachers and probably fellow, da'is or group of people. And make sure that you develop yourself, especially your spirituality, as well as, because you might be engaged in core people to Islam, but if you're lacking in your own Islamic development, be that education, knowledge-wise, or spirituality, then you end up causing harm to others and yourself, more importantly. So make sure you've got some kind of a structure program that you can work on to develop yourself. And before you go out into, starting to invite people to Islam, especially if it's like as focused on you. I don't mean like in an organizational sense where you might be behind the scenes or whatever. If you're becoming the focus of the dawahs and you're the man in front of the camera, then you shouldn't be in front of the camera unless you've learned the basics of tahara, salah, saum, zakat, the basics of what you need to be in your life before you make yourself the face of Islam, because you will cause more damage. And especially since we live in a culture where people associate themselves to figures and personalities, because when you fall, you end up in other people fall because they've invested in the person and not the tradition. That would be my advice. And utilize any opportunity that comes your way for dawah. If you're at uni, the ISOC, Allah's placed you there, and get involved in the ISOC, try and do something. If you've got an active local masjid and you could do something, utilize that. Try and utilize whatever platform you have to do dawah. It doesn't have to be something you started off. It doesn't have to be you in front of the camera. Just support what's going out there. And last, if you can't unite the ummah, don't do anything to divide the ummah.
Jazakallah khair, Maroof. Really appreciate you coming on. I hope I haven't offended you in any way, and if I have, then please maaf. And but I don't forgive your laptop, and then your phone, and then your laptop, and then your phone.
See, this is the problem when you can't invest in the comment.
Allah, this is going to be a memorable podcast.
Somebody said on the side chat, which is quite funny. They said, "What advice would you give to somebody who was joining dawah?" And they wrote, "Get good Wi-Fi in this day and age."
I thought you was going to say get a good wine this day and age or the Wi-Fi.
Anyway, Jazakallah khair, Maroof, and we will see you inshallah. Inshallah, maybe in the future, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam. So yeah, guys. So Brother Maroof is now off. Just last comments, guys. What do you guys have to say?
No, it's really good having Maroof on. MashaAllah. Alhamdulillah. I think it was a good show, very enlightening about Brother Maroof's journey, because obviously he's been doing this for years. And inshallah, not next week, Mufti Sahib, the week after that, we'll be doing a very controversial topic. Inshallah. So stay tuned for that.
Is it clickbait? It's not clickbait, is it?
Proper clickbait this is. So it's going to be...
if the earth is round or flat. Is it one of those ones?
No, it's going to be on the 15th of October. And the topic we're going to be talking about is with an organization called My Tazkiyah, who deal with porn addictions.
Excellent.
Are you getting, what's his name? Ustad Idris?
Idris is on there, man.
Alhamdulillah. All right, so guys.
Sorry, Ustad Idrisi.
Ustad Idrisi.
Is that Idrisi from Spain?
I'm not too sure. I've met him. The brother works within the charity sector in some aspect. I think he does a bit.
Oh, he's a different guy then. I thought you were talking about Sheikh Idrisi in Seville.
No. This is one from Birmingham who used to take the car. This is one from the UK who used to kind of visit with the Qadis, but his recitation was better than most of this.
Allahu Akbar.
Uh,
I think it's excellent having Maroof on because he gave us. You could tell he's got lots of experience the way he was talking
and I'll
in
tell
this
you one
field.
thing, piece of Maroof obviously doesn't, dwell into names. There's probably not many people that the brothers and sisters have probably listened to on YouTube or on cassette that Maroof hasn't hosted. And I mean the biggest names that obviously certain reasons won't share right now, but everybody that you can think of as
Like
certain-
Sheikh Plant and Sheikh
Yeah.
Red Chair.
shirts that you get. Oh, I'll forget about it anyway.
I was going to start listing off some YouTube influencers and say, oh, the Sheikh this and Sheikh that as well.
Talking about people before YouTube.
Yeah, I think it's these kind of individual people don't know about like the behind the scenes people. I mean, behind the scenes people deserve credit sometimes. The unspoken heroes.
And
unsung
Alhamdulillah, one
heroes.
thing Maroof didn't mention, I'd like to mention. One of even though he said it wasn't a signature event, I'd probably disagree with him. The UMC, it did something that was so unique. It was called the United Muslims Convention, and Maroof literally hosted a speaker from every Jama'ah, from the Sunni spectrum of Islam. So every person was represented. And out of that, that was profound, basically. And getting everybody under one roof, you had people even just like the people that used to show up, you'd see some green turbans, you see no turbans, you see hats, no hats, all sorts of stuff, basically. And bringing everyone to the same roof, under the same roof, and talking about general subjects that affected everyone. And it was really good, man, alhamdulillah. Maroof told me not to be such a judgmental, pigeonholed kind of Muslim, to be honest with yourself, Mufti Sahib. So I hope you got a lot. So before I met anybody like yourself or anybody that was an alim or a mufti or anything like that, Maroof was my go-to guy. And I believe if I do any good, I genuinely believe this, whether it be in whatever sector, if Allah accepts any of my deeds, this guy's going to get a share of the reward. Because he was there for me when nobody was.
MashaAllah.
Qasim is saying no hats, astaghfirullah. Qasim, look, what have I got on my head? Wait, what is this?
I have a hat as well.
Is this a sock?
He has headphones.
Is this a sock?
I don't know what I'm going to wear.
Musab, it's 12:10. I need to go. Bedtime now. Cinderella
there
needs
goes
to go.
So Jazakallah khair, guys. Thank you very much, and we will see you guys next time, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.